What's good, everyone? OJ here. Welcome back to another Nintendo Switch E3 2021 video. Today we're taking a look at the Legend of Zelda 35th anniversary, some of my thoughts on what's going to happen, but also my expanded gameplay predictions for the Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild 2, plus some stuff that I would just want to see in the game. So before we get into all this, please make sure you hit that like button and also subscribe, as we're going to be going into overdrive for E3 2021. We're going to be covering with live streams, videos, giveaways, and so much more. So make sure you subscribe if you're someone new and hit that notification bell to get all of our live stream updates and videos as soon as they drop. Now, with that out of the way, let's go in and get right into this. And we're starting off with the Legend of Zelda 35th anniversary. So I've talked about this before on previous videos, but I've often mixed it with other things. This, we're just completely focusing on the Legend of Zelda, one of my favorite franchises of all time, especially with the recent addition of the Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, and of course the forthcoming Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild 2 or sequel, or whatever you want to call it at this point. So let's first start off with the Legend of Zelda 35th anniversary. So here is what I think is going to happen. Nintendo has two perfectly good Zelda games that people have been wanting now for years, that are already in HD, that could be optimized and put out on the Nintendo Switch pretty much this year. And I'm almost positive everyone knows what I'm talking about here already, but that is the Legend of Zelda Wind Waker HD and also the Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess HD. Both of these games originally came out on the Wii U with the HD versions, but they're both from the GameCube and also GameCube and Wii respectively. When it comes to Twilight Princess, Nintendo could easily bring over those HD versions of the game, but I'd like to see them make a few optimizations before I get into some of the other things that I think they can bring back with the legacy titles of the Legend of Zelda. I would like to see if they can up both of these games to 60 frames per second. Now, Wind Waker HD is a very interesting game because it's not a complete remake of the original Legend of Zelda Wind Waker, but they did do a new lighting system. They did reconstruct some things. It actually looks really good in comparison to Twilight Princess because of the art style and because of some of the work that they did. However, tinkering with so much stuff in that game did cause some problems on the Wii U, mainly with the frame rate kind of dipping every now and then. I remember playing, I think sometimes like when you fight against like those huge like octopuses out in the sea, like it would dip down below 30 frames per second. So fully optimizing both of these games to either run completely solid, no issues, 30 frames per second, or at 60 frames per second like they did with the Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword HD. That would make three separate legacy Legend of Zelda games that all run at 1080p 60 on the Switch. That would be very good for Legend of Zelda fans. I think people would go nuts, especially if they made those type of improvements, because most people just want to see the games wholesale on the Nintendo Switch exactly how they were on the Wii U. So I'm hoping that Nintendo does do a bit more and upgrade them to run at a higher frame rate, and also of course the resolution being bumped up, although they both ran at 1080p. So it really just comes down to the performance and optimizing it for the Nintendo Switch portable play as well. So we'll see what goes on with that. Now, what is the price and packaging going to be? Now, that's going to be the most interesting thing for some people, because some feel that Nintendo could pull a Super Mario 3D All-Stars with the Legend of Zelda 35th anniversary and this pack and say, hey, it's going to be 60 bucks and it's going to be limited time only. You're only going to be able to do it from this time to this time, which it's still a possibility since Nintendo's done it before, but I just don't feel that Nintendo's just going to follow the same strategy that they did before. It's just something tells me that, yeah, it seems like they could. There's things that maybe say, hey, they can do this just because they did it already, but I just don't think they're going to do the exact same thing that they've already done, because Nintendo often switches things up when it comes to anniversaries or things like this. Now, I do have one more thing here when it comes to the legacy titles and what we could see at E3, and that is a new remake, potentially from Grezzo here, the guys that did the Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening on the Nintendo Switch. That remake was fantastic. I do think they could be working on something new, and the next remake that I'm thinking about is potentially the Legend of Zelda The Minish Cap on the GBA. I played the game originally on the GBA player via the GameCube back in the day. So it's something that I actually hold really true to my heart. I think it's a fantastic game, and seeing that get a full remake like Link's Awakening did, that would be very, very cool. I think that's one of the main Zelda games that people haven't played quite as much as some of the other ones, especially considering how good that game is. So maybe we get a little bit of a tease for the Legend of Zelda Minish Cap remake. So we'll see about that. Now let's move on to the main thing here, guys. When it comes to E3 2021, the Nintendo Direct that's going down, Nintendo definitely wants to make a splash. Back in 2019, Nintendo, out of nowhere, literally caught everybody by surprise, because you have to remember, the Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild back in 2019, when they're doing their E3, it was barely over 2 years old. People were still buying the game, people were still playing through it, people were still getting through some of the DLC that Nintendo released, people were still going through it. It was just fine. It wasn't like people were saying, oh my gosh, we need another sequel to Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild like right now. That wasn't the case at all. People were just like, okay, whatever they show, you know, it's cool. People were enjoying Breath of the Wild and just going through and playing it. And all of a sudden, boom, out of nowhere at the very end, Breath of the Wild sequel, and we see Princess Zelda, and we see Link, and we see them underneath the castle, and the evil reincarnated and brought back. I mean, it just sent everyone into a tizzy. And I think that with The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild 2, I mean, the game needs to do quite a bit, because for as good as Zelda Breath of the Wild is, it's one of my favorite games of all time. It's easily my favorite Zelda game of all time. There's some things that they can do to enhance the experience and make it even better for players out there now that they actually have a hold of the Switch system, what they're doing, the hardware and everything. Because you have to remember, Breath of the Wild was a Wii U game at first. It was in development for multiple years on the Wii U. Then they had to kind of pivot a little bit and put it out on the Nintendo Switch. So this time, it's just going to be a Nintendo Switch game, and anything else they decide to optimize it for. So I think that it has a lot more potential to do more things, because now they don't have to worry about other stuff, and they have the basis down of what Breath of the Wild type of gameplay is. So let's go over some predictions and also some things that I would like to see in the game. Of course, the performance optimizations and the engine for the Nintendo Switch, that goes without saying. I think they did a good job in terms of optimizing things and releasing patches, but having that more stable and better at launch would definitely be much appreciated. Next up would be a blacksmith for weapon maintenance, plus no breaking for the true Master Sword. This is something that I think I have a little bit of a love-hate relationship with. I think that it's cool with some of the stuff to where things can break and you can throw them, and when you do it for the last hit, it's more powerful. Like, I get that, but at the same time, it seems like all these really cool weapons shouldn't be shattering after a number of hits, unless you get like the durability ones and stuff like that, which were kind of random based on where you were in the game and everything. So there needs to be a little bit more of a uniform system in terms of how you get your weapons, what you can do to those weapons, which ones you want to keep. I think that it's a little bit lame at times when you have a really cool weapon and you know it's just going to be gone because you can't use it because it's going to break at some point. So they can still have weapon breaking if they want to have it in there, but it shouldn't break completely. It should just go down when it comes to the power of the weapon. So it's like, oh, like I can't use it, or it's really dull, the power's not there, and then you have a chance to go to a blacksmith in town and actually repair that weapon or fortify it and make it better. And once you get the Master Sword, it shouldn't run out of energy and have to take time to come back. That's ridiculous in my opinion. It's the Master Sword. It shouldn't have to go through any of that. So those are the two things that I'd like to see there. Now, next up, I would like optional and main dungeons with actual enticing rewards. Some of the things that I remember in previous Zelda games, while they did have some side dungeons and some main dungeons that you go through, it seemed like it always followed a set type of path. They were good, don't get me wrong, they were good, but it's like you go in there, you get some weapon, then you use that against the boss. I would like them to kind of change things up a little bit, like they've done before in some games. I know like Majora's Mask, and I know that like Phantom Hourglass, there's been games that have changed up the dungeons and the structure. I'd like to see some of that innovation, not exactly what those games do, but just some innovation within there. If you do this optional dungeon, it's very hard, like you have to go through, and when you beat it, you get something that's very useful in your fight against Ganon, or in your fight against the evil, or saving Hyrule. It needs to mean something outside of just the main dungeons. And of course, having the main dungeons in there, that would be great. You know, I know that they had like the Divine Beasts, and they were kind of like dungeons, but not really as good as what Nintendo's done before. so making whatever they're going to do for dungeons better and more optimal for people to play that like the old school Zelda games, but then also making optional dungeons and making it to where it actually is worth your time. Because to me, the shrines and going through and doing all that was worth my time, but I'd like for them to take it a little step further with what they're going to do there. Now, with that being said, I still want them to keep the flavor and flow of the original Legend of Zelda, and that is the open world exploration. That needs to stay alive, because as much as Zelda fans will scream to the high heavens, to the goddess, or whatever they want to say, will scream about how it needs to go back to Ocarina of Time and all that, there's a reason why Breath of the Wild is the best-selling Zelda game of all time by a large margin, because they did take that open world formula, and it wasn't just the same corny, boring open worlds that we've played before. It was actually a very vibrant, it was a very good open world with all sorts of little nooks and crannies, and it really expanded and innovated on the open world formula in terms of being able to like chop down a tree and then you can cross over there. You were able to manipulate the environment in order to take out enemies. You were able to climb anywhere that you want. That type of freedom and that type of innovation within the open world games that a lot of games, even in today's day, aren't doing to the level that Legend of Zelda did is what made it awesome. So I'd love to see them continue that and even expand upon it further, make more cool things in the open world, make it to where there's more wildlife and more stuff going on in the open world. In addition to those dungeons, you do both of those. If you can somehow cram all of that into one game, now that you've got your hold on the Switch system, I think that this can once again even top what Breath of the Wild had to do. Now, next up would be the Sheikah Slate, Sheikah powers, the abilities, enhancing that. The Sheikah Slate is awesome. It's one of the coolest weapons or tools of all time in a Zelda game. Probably my favorite one. That and like the hook shot too. Those are really cool. Master Sword, of course, is awesome, but I would love to see them expand upon it. Make new powers within there, make new abilities, make it do different things, make it manipulate different ways. I mean, there's all sorts of ideas that are brimming in my head. Some of them are too crazy for me to go over, or it would take me just way too long to start thinking about all the different things, but I trust the Zelda team. I trust Mr. Enuma and what they're doing there, and I'm almost positive if they don't have a Sheikah Slate, they'll have something that's very similar to a Sheikah Slate, and I think that they're going to expand it to like maybe 10 different things that you can do with it, and I think they're going to expand it to like maybe 9 to 10 different things that you can do with it this time around compared to what they had before in the first Breath of the Wild game. So I can see them using the Sheikah Slate and all sorts of cool and interesting ways. Now, these last two things here, guys, one of them would be the potential gameplay segments with Princess Zelda. This is something that's been rumored. This is something that's been talked about quite a bit. I don't know if it's going to be full out co-op like some people are trying to say or say that they want. I mean, that might be cool, but I think that there might be certain segments that Princess Zelda could be used, right? You can use like her bow and arrow, or you can use something with her magic. You make particular gameplay segments for Princess Zelda in there when you're with Link. So I think that would be pretty cool. Or even if she's somewhere else, she has certain parts that she does do. I'm not sure if it's going to be like a full on, you can just use Princess Zelda the whole time. I don't think they're going to go that far, but I do feel that there will probably be some segments where you do use Princess Zelda. So that would be pretty cool in my opinion. And also, of course, shake things up just a bit. Now, last but not least, and don't put too much into this, I do feel that there will be some Nintendo Switch Pro enhancements and optimizations, but I don't think this will be at E3. I think this is something that once we get more information, because I'm not sure if Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild 2 is launching this year. I think it's probably going to be an early next year title. So of course, if it is early next year or first half next year, I think the Nintendo Switch Pro will be out by then. So I'm hoping that we do see some nice natural improvements or even enhancements that they've made sure to include in there when they do release the game. So those are my thoughts on the Legend of Zelda 35th anniversary, and of course, Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild 2. If I think of more stuff, I might make another video when it comes down to it. I'm very passionate about the Legend of Zelda, especially the Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild 2 and Breath of the Wild. Those are just awesome. I love the original Breath of the Wild, and I'm looking forward a lot to Breath of the Wild 2. So those are my thoughts on it. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comment section below. All right, guys, that wraps it up for this video here. Check out the links in the description. We've got Twitter. Go and give us a follow on there. Stay up to date on all the latest gaming news and information. Also, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, and share this video if you can. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll catch you for the next one. Peace.